Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you're here today. Today, my guest is Stefanie Krievins. She is the president of The Change Architects, which is a boutique integration firm dedicated to driving transformation and upskilling workers in mid-market and enterprise organizations. She is an expert in change management, in conflict, in accountability, and she uses a framework called the change architecture with her clients. She is also the host of the Hot Mess Hotline, which is a podcast for ambitious leaders who want to drive impactful change. I know you're going to enjoy this interview with Stefanie, so hang tight and I will be right back. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I have Stefanie Krievins with me. Stefanie, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. We're going to have so much fun. So you are the president of the Change Architects. So can you tell us a little bit about what the Change Architects is and why you started it?
Yeah. So we really focus on helping organizations figure out how to optimize their tech, people, and process. And we do that by helping them create cultures of change readiness, especially in small businesses and in the mid-market too. Change is just coming at us constantly, and we feel like we have to keep up and we have to outpace and we have to know what's always coming up. It can be exhausting or it can be exhilarating. And so instead we take the perspective that let's get your people ready to figure out what's next and set the pace for change versus always in reaction mode. And that looks like having really great leadership development programs, really great change readiness programs, really great talent experience and communication and project management programs. But instead of all of them being disconnected, we have a unifying strategy that connects the dots on all of those buckets and says, instead of having all these different programs, let's have one program that implements all of that and makes your strategic plan a reality.
I love this word, change readiness. So can you tell a little bit more about what you mean by that and how do you help somebody be ready for change?
Yeah. So for a long time, it's kind of been accepted practice in our organizations that change is hard and nobody likes change. And that's really an upskilling problem. A lot of leaders run into resistance and perceived resistance when their folks start questioning them or start asking questions or start trying to make sense of it in their own head with the leaders communicating. Leaders perceive that as resistance. And my perspective is that's probably not always resistance. It's probably them trying to make sense of it so that they can enact your vision because they want to. So that's an element of change readiness, is perceiving the questioning as they're open to it. They just need to make sense of it before they can move forward. Or instead of hearing an idea and shutting down, it's being curious about it and saying, I need to digest that. I need to make sense of that for my role in my department. That's change readiness. Or understanding your relationship to change, plain and simple, right? I love change for change's sake. A lot of leaders do. That's one way of relating to change. Do you understand your relationship to change and how to leverage that for the organization? So self-awareness, team awareness, organizational awareness around when do we accept change? Why do we accept it? How do we put it to good use for our business and the industry that we're in? Change readiness.
You know, I think in my experience, at least, it's easy to say people are resistant to change or don't want to change, but really it's not actually even about the idea or the direction or the strategy. It really comes down to people saying, I only want to change if I want to change. And so when they don't have control of that external world,
Yes.
then they're going to be forced to change themselves. And I always go back to that idea that you got to talk about what it means for that person and help them decide that they're ready to actually make that change, because nobody wants to be forced to change themselves. And that's what this all is. If you're going through some big organizational shift, people's jobs are going to change. What does that mean to me? I'm comfortable. I don't really want to change what I do. I don't want to go learn a new skill.
Yes.
I don't want to be forced to have to do that. And that always helps me have more compassion, because even though I am a change agent myself and, I thrive on change, I thrive on disruption because I'm the CEO, I get to do it on my own terms most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time versus on somebody else's terms. But that's not always the case as an individual contributor where you feel like you might be at the whims of leadership's decisions.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I connect it to employee engagement models where they say that employees, in order to be engaged in their work, they want to be valued, they want to have autonomy, and they want to have work that means something. And to your point exactly, when we are handing a decision to our people, in that moment, it feels like there's an element of autonomy being taken away because they
Yeah.
signed up for an old job. They signed up for their old role, those duties. And along the way, things have course corrected. But in that moment, it feels like you taking away a decision from them. And they need a minute to wrestle with it. They deserve to kind of cycle through that in their brain so that they can get themselves on board and find meaning in the new thing that you're asking them to do.
So I completely agree with you. And I think that this ability to be ready for change is such an important trait because things do change so fast now. Things are always changing, but the pace of change is so rapid, especially with the onslaught of technology and what's going to happen with AI.
Yes.
Our roles are going to change so much. It's going to look very different 5 years from now than what it does today. And so I really like this idea of change readiness and how do you help people prepare for it because we're all going to be forced to look at things differently because of how disruptive AI will eventually be to the way that we work. I don't even know if people are really having those conversations, if it's just like that, oh, worry about it later fear that's out there. Certainly for running a company, I think about it a lot. Like, how is this going to change the way that we work? And I think it's hard for anybody to say exactly what it's going to look like, but we all know we're going to have to change.
Yeah, and I think when we're stuck in the messy middle of change like that, where as a leader, you're asking these questions, you're being curious, you don't have the answers, you want to go to your team and say, hey, help me answer these really big questions around AI, digital transformation, whatever the next thing is. There is a large segment of people that are sitting there going, oh God, change is coming and I don't know what it means. And because I don't know what it means and it's uncertain, they freak out a little bit and
Yeah.
they need support in understanding themselves so that they can be comfortable in the uncertainty. That cannot be your responsibility to manage that for Sarah in accounting. That has to be
Yeah.
Sarah's responsibility. And that's why I do believe the work that we do is so important because I want to help Sarah engage herself in the AI conversation, not Sarah sit there and wring her hands for 2 years and work herself out of a job because she couldn't engage in what's next. That's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, I think this is such an important part of upskilling. And I think a lot of people don't really understand what upskilling means
Mhm.
and how to tackle it. Certainly, as a country, we're not doing it and we should be, but organizations need to be looking at it as well and bringing people along for that journey so that it isn't so. But I think a lot of leaders, of course, they don't know what it's going to look like either. But can you talk to us a little bit about this idea of upskilling and how important it is and how leaders can start to incorporate it more in these conversations as they're discussing the change and what the future is going to look like?
Yeah, thanks for opening the door. I think this is such an important conversation, and I do think we can simplify it a bit so it's not so overwhelming. The way I think about it is in order to design the skill set that you need for your organization in 5 or 10 years, the organization has to know where it's going to be in 5 or 10 years
Yeah.
or about. We have to decide if we're going to try to travel to California together or Chicago together or Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Those are all three very different destinations as a company. The company has to be able to articulate a vision. Who are the heroes inside of our organization? What purpose are we serving in the world? Then from there, we can extrapolate what skills we need in order to be successful in the future. And of course, these are broad strokes because no one knows what the future holds unless you're a fortune teller. And if that's the case, we need more of you, but none of us that I know are fortune tellers. And so in the future, about where are we going to be, about what do we need, and you can articulate that in hard skills fairly simply as a way to get something down on paper to get us towards something to work towards versus, well, we're going somewhere. We're going to do some things. Yeah, we need some people in IT. It's, well, actually, in IT, we know that we want to maintain the CIO role. We want to add on a chief AI officer, and these are the strategies that that person will deploy. So if these are the strategies, these are the top 10 skills that we need. What does that look like today? What skills should we hire for? Now let's hire for those roles and let's work a development plan so that in 5 years, they're closer to being able to deliver on their strategies. And so it's just reverse engineering your organization of the future. What makes it so hard is it's hard to decide what kind of organization do we want to be in 10 years. It's a very creative question, but it's also a very mind-blowing question. And I think that's what these times are calling leaders for, is make some decisions about the future so that we can get our butts on that bus and start going.
I did this exercise and I guess it was probably 2018. I could see how technology was going to change our industry. We make industrial cleaning equipment,
Yeah.
really dirty, old school industry. You could start to see how technology was going to be needed from an efficiency standpoint, a safety standpoint, from a labor standpoint. I wrote out this document, this statement of what the future looks like and basically what our role was going to be in it, but how are we going to drive it? And it really helped all of my employees, my team, see when we make these decisions, this is what it's going to be. And it's a couple pages long, right? I
Yes.
mean, I went
Yep.
through and talked about it. This is what our customers look like. This is what our customers look like. Here's what we look like. Here's the technology that we're going to bring in. Here's how we need to think about structuring our go-to-market strategy. And so every year now I go in and I update that with things that we've learned and how it's changed and things that we've done to advance it or places where we missed. And now it's this living, breathing document of what the future looks like. And then it's really clear driving our vision statement. And a lot of leaders poo-poo vision and mission statements, but then I would say that you aren't using them properly because they do need to be driving your activities. So our vision for our core company, Stone Age Tools, is to have working industrial cleaning robotics in every heavy manufacturing facility in the world by 2040. There's a lot in that, right? Working, meaning people are using it. It's not just something that they buy and put off to the side. Industrial cleaning robotics, it tells where we're going from a technology perspective. How are we going to set ourselves up globally to be able to do this? And that drives all of our activities. And it's such a powerful vision. Every word in that vision matters because it's driving some sort of activity. And so it makes us make trade-offs. We have a core business. The core business is very different than the new business. So how do we exploit the core business while thinking about the new business in a different way? Because it's not going to fit into the old business model very well. And so it really does strike those right kind of conversations. I think that just feeds in really well to what you just said. If you are a leader listening to this, have that, whether that's for your company, if you're a CEO or you're leading your team. Try to imagine what 3, 5, 10 years looks like and help point your team in that right direction. Because you're right. If people are just like, well, why would we do something different than what's made us successful for the last 40 years? Well, that's not going to probably make you successful for the next 40. You got to have a clear vision of where you want to go.
Oh my gosh. Were we separated at birth? Like, yes, yes, to all of that. The leaders that we work with, we teach them to write the vision story, which is exactly what you've articulated, because we get so caught up in a vision statement and trying to boiling it down to 2 or 3 sentences full of jargon. No, we need a full story to do justice to what you articulated.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
And then one sentence, right? Yeah. Our vision is to have working industrial cleaning robotics in every major heavy manufacturing facility in the world by 2040. It's super clear. It's not a bunch of jargon. It's very simple. It absolutely drives the direction of our strategy. But you have to go through that work of writing out the story because otherwise it's hard to actually really distill it down to something that's impactful and meaningful and that everybody gets.
Can I ask you a question that goes along with that?
Yeah.
How do you help yourself and your team stay in that frustrating spot of making the trade-offs today that you know you have to make to be successful in the long term?
So we really talk about it through the lens of ambidextrous thinking. I love the book Lead and Disrupt. We're reading it again right now. What we try to do is we look at exploit the core business. And the core business is what we've always used to do. It doesn't mean that it's going away anytime soon. But what you do with that is very different. The investment comes in cost reduction, in efficiency, and that's different. And then you have this new business, which we want to explore. And so that is about looking at new business models and being open to lower margins or a different cost structure, a different pricing structure, because we're doing something that's very different. So that's how I've done it, is teaching my leaders ambidextrous thinking, but really looking at it that way. This is the core business, and these are the types of activities that we do to make sure that at least we maintain where we are, even though we're not necessarily going to invest heavily in new product development. This is where all of the new product development is going to go. And we are going to be in explorer mode and go through our thought process very differently and kind of spell that out. So that's how I do it, just because Lead and Disrupt really resonated with me. And I love the idea of ambidextrous thinking. I think leaders need to be able to have that ability to hold opposing truths in their minds. And really being able to develop that skill set is hard to do. but it gives kind of more clarity for my team of why we're doing different activities for the different types of businesses.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And I'm probably going to borrow all of that from you because in today's modern culture, saying no to things, I think is very, very painful.
Yeah,
It's almost FOMO, like it's almost business FOMO. And it's
totally.
stopping leaders from making those really tough, strategic,
Yep.
focused decisions. And I think that both and mentality, that ambidextrous thinking is much
Yeah.
more life-giving, much more creative.
I totally agree. I went through that same thing. I took on too many things because of fear of missing out.
Yep.
And then when we decided that we were going to really go after autonomous robots, I said, we're going to pick one specific application and we're going to nail that first. And so that means saying no to all of these other things that also do need our attention. But this is how fast we're going to grow. We're an employee owned company. We don't get outside financing.
Hmm.
This is the process that we're going to use to grow. So we have to stay really, really focused on this particular application. And so that has made it easier because we've put that kind of bounds on it of this is what we're going to nail first, and then we'll go after this next one. But if we haven't nailed this application, then we're not ready to move on. And so that helps with that ability to say, nope, we're going to pass on that for now. It'll be on the roadmap, but until we really dial this in, we're not going to work on anything outside of it. And that's hard. That's a hard thing to do. I mean, I get wrapped up in like, oh gosh, that's a great opportunity. Oh, I can see how that would fit in. But if you don't have the time or the resources to do it, then you're going to do things mediocre
Yes.
or actually fail rather than be known for something that you're really good at and have that dialed first. So that's how we've kind of tried to structure that. But it resonates what you say. I think a lot of leaders do have a fear of if I say no to this, someone else is going to do it. And what if that hurts my business?
Yeah. I was at a conference last week with a bunch of CIOs, and this one gentleman and I were debating about what it means to be a strong leader in modern times. And his perspective was we're seeing a lot of weak leadership in their inability to make the hard decisions and
Yeah.
create the strategic focus and direction for us that we need as employees to really understand how to deliver value. And I wouldn't use the words weak per se, those were his words, but I
Mhm.
can definitely see how business history points to those companies willing to niche down, focus in,
Yeah.
stay the course on something innovative and hard without all the shiny objects. And I'm such a shiny objects person, so I'm especially envious of people that can do it.
Yeah.
So,
It does. It takes discipline.
it
It really
does.
does
It
take
does.
discipline. And I understand where leaders are when you don't want to make the call. It's like, what if I make the wrong decision?
Yes.
And that's a tough one. Nobody wants to make the wrong decision. But I agree with you. You got to make a decision and invest in it and go for it. You're always going to be better off if you focus than if you don't focus.
Yes.
And then if you get it wrong, pivot.
Yes.
That's what we have to do, right? Pivoting
Mhm.
is a huge part of running businesses, especially this day and age. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's pivot to accountability because I know that you are big on accountability,
Yeah.
but you have a little bit of a different way of looking at it. The adage goes, I have to hold people accountable, but you look at it a little bit differently. So, can you share your thoughts on accountability and how leaders can really frame it to hold themselves accountable and others accountable?
Yeah. I love to talk about accountability and conflict because I do believe they are two competencies that really can drive change in our relationships, in our lives, in our workplaces. I see them as fundamental skills to being successful as a human being. And so, accountability, I like to start with the definition because we tend to church it up and overcomplicate it. It's do what you say you will do when you say you will do it. Just do what you say you will do when you say you will do it. The conversation around accountability is not about holding people accountable. I don't know anyone that gets joy from holding people accountable because I think it feels like shit on both sides.
Yeah.
And where I learned this was my husband and I were foster parents, and we had this contentious relationship with our case manager. Very different system. The child welfare system has a definition of accountability that I do not comprehend and do not play well with. And so our case manager didn't follow through on something as promised. And I was sending this email to her to hold her accountable. And I sent it and I just felt like junk. Like I just had that feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I'm going to get in trouble. I didn't do
Hmm.
something. Why isn't this done? And I was so frustrated. And my husband is an unbelievably effective people manager. And I said to him, I was like, this sucks. Like holding people accountable feels terrible. He's like, it does. It just sucks. And I was like, It does, in all areas of our lives. Like, why are we holding people accountable? Because it puts the pressure on the person to do something when it's the other
Mhm.
person's job who is supposed to be accountable. So if that person is just accountable, then that's all there
No,
is
that's
to
all it
it.
has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's like simplify it a little bit. And so I think that accountability creates freedom. When we promise and deliver to somebody else, we are making the promise. We are holding discipline for ourselves to deliver on a time frame, or at the very least, holding discipline for ourselves to communicate, hey, I can't meet this result. I can't meet this task, versus Carrie going, you said that you would get this to me by last Friday and it's Tuesday. Like, where is it? Why is that taking up your brain space? That is not
Yeah.
fair. So instead, I want to invite people to create freedom for themselves to promise and deliver, which means you get to focus, which means that you get to say no to other things that doesn't help you uphold your promises. Especially in today's working age, as knowledge workers, we spend our day churning out stuff and typing, and it's really hard to feel accomplished. And I want people to feel accomplished at the end of the day. The way you feel accomplished is you promise and deliver. And that's what I think is inviting people into accountability.
Yeah, I agree with you. I hate that. I don't like that. It's like I now have to take the responsibility for somebody else doing their job. I mean, I wrote a book called The Ownership Mindset.
Yes.
I mean, we're a employee-owned company, right? And that's why I like this idea of personal responsibility because you're right. Accountability comes kind of after the fact. Did I do what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do
Yes.
that? I like that pure, simple definition that you have. But the personal responsibility comes in to say, I am that kind of person. I am going to be that kind of person who does what she says she's going to do.
Yes.
And that's where that responsibility comes in. If you're trying to hold somebody accountable who doesn't have that personal responsibility, it doesn't feel good.
Mm.
And it isn't your responsibility to make somebody else personally responsible. That has to come from each of us. And that's really the basis of the ownership mindset is I own everything that happens in my life. I own my decisions. I own my actions. I own my effort. It's not somebody else's fault.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think too, that gets connected to integrity. So many of us
Yeah.
want to have integrity in our lives. We want our outside actions to match our internal feelings. And when we don't promise and deliver, we're losing integrity with ourselves. We don't trust
Yeah.
ourselves. Our confidence tanks. It's a whole vicious circle that sends us
Mhm.
spiraling into yuckiness, when instead we could have a virtuous cycle of, let me do what I say I'm going to do. Let me try. Let me put in the effort. Let me communicate. Let me show up with effort. That is a much better way of being in this world than like,
Yeah.
I suck. I can't deliver. I didn't do it. I have to go tell this person, or I'm going to lie a little bit. That takes too much energy. I'm too
Yeah.
tired for that.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so let's talk a little bit because as leaders, we
Mm.
do have to hold people accountable
Yes.
from time to time.
Yep.
So, how can you do that in a way that is assertive yet kind so that it actually can bring that partnership up where you don't feel yucky about it and the person you're holding accountable doesn't feel yucky about it?
Yeah. So to me, it starts in the conversation with that person and using coaching techniques in the moment to get that person to commit to the thing that they are willing and able to commit to in a time frame that makes sense. So it's not, hey, Carrie, I need that report by next Wednesday. It is, Carrie, I need something to present to the board, and the board meeting is next Friday. What kind of report can you get to me that you think will help me communicate effectively? So what does success look like? And when can you get it to me? We want them to offer up the definition of success first before we insert our definition, because again, we're giving them autonomy and we're getting a sense of what their skill set is in the moment. We're allowing them to set the deadline. And those two things, again, we're putting autonomy back where it
Yeah.
belongs. So that conversation. And of course, if it's actually like super time mission critical, you're going to manage it very closely because there's no negotiating on that. A board meeting is a board meeting. At a board meeting time, you can have nothing less than perfection for that. So if you have to manage that very closely, you will. But more often than not, missing the deadline isn't going to tank the business completely, isn't going to blow anything
Right.
up, but it does have its repercussions. And so if that person does miss quality and timeline expectations, it's a conversation. Hey, you promised me this kind of report by Wednesday, and on Thursday, this is what I received, and it didn't meet my expectations. Help me understand what got you here.
It's like seek to understand.
Yes,
I think
yes,
that's a really good way
yes.
to approach it. Okay. Yeah, this is what you committed to and didn't happen. Let's talk about what happened. Share that with me. And then it allows the person to actually be able to take ownership of it and explain what happened versus you coming down and making those assumptions, which then doesn't feel good. So I like that approach of seek to understand.
As a manager, I think that's where self-leadership comes in. You have to learn to manage your emotional response, your frustration, your why didn't this person do what I thought they were going to
Yeah.
do? Well, it's probably a skill level, which means they need some upskilling, which as a manager, you're in the perfect position to train and coach them. The last thing you want to do is take it from them and not give them feedback. I'm probably notorious in my organization in a good way. I'll just send a message. This doesn't meet my expectations. I need this, this, and this. Take another stab at it.
Yep, absolutely. I'm the same exact way. Well, how does anybody learn if you just do it for them?
For control.
Yeah, exactly. But I think a lot of people is like, it's going to take less time. It's just going to be easier if I just do it myself.
In the short
But
run.
then guess what? You're always going to be doing it yourself. So, how does this play into engagement? There's so much disengagement inside of organizations. We see all the Gallup reports, that we're barely moving the needle, a little bit of positivity, and then it goes backwards, right?
Yeah.
But it's always really low.
Yep.
How does accountability and pressure play into this? Does it make the situation worse? Does it make it better? How can leaders think about disengagement through the lens of accountability?
Oh, good question. Oh my gosh. Let me approach it a couple of different ways. The one that I hear most often is leaders saying, I'm afraid to press them too hard because I'm afraid they'll leave. I'm afraid
Yeah.
to hold them to my high expectations because I'm afraid they can't do it. Anytime as a leader you're making a decision out of fear, it is absolutely 110% the wrong decision every
Mhm.
single time. So as a leader, you have to step into your bravery, your courage, and invite them into something bigger, invite them into high expectations, invite them into their higher self. I'm going to go back to employees need meaning, autonomy, and to feel connected. Accountability gives them autonomy. Accountability gives them meaning. Accountability gives them connection. Why wouldn't we use anything other than accountability? Ultimately, if you have folks that are unwilling to step into their purpose, their autonomy, and engage themselves in their job, that's a choice that they're making. That means they need to choose to work somewhere else where they can find meaning, where they can find connection, where they can find autonomy, because as human beings, they deserve that. So I would say use accountability to build engagement because you're using accountability conversations, you're using conflict conversations to build connections in the right ways. That's what's going to build engagement, not giving them more free rein, less clear expectation. That creates frustration. So I think as a leader, the more meaning you can give and invite them into accountability, you're inviting them into engagement. The language I use that's different than most HR leaders is that there's a lot of HR language that says it's the leader's job to engage them. It's their leader's job to motivate them. Absolutely not. It is the employee's job to engage and motivate themselves in their own role to make themselves happy. No one else can do that for them.
Another interesting aspect to look at this through is through micromanagement, because I think a lot of managers think that I am holding people accountable by micromanaging every detail of it.
Yes.
The extreme of like I'm giving less expectations and I'm letting them have free reign. But then I think that there's also this other side of things where it's I'm going to make sure that I don't just tell them what I want, but I'm also going to tell them how. And you're doing their thinking for them, or you're making them do it your way, which doesn't take that autonomy piece of it. And so, what advice would you have for those people who might tend to be micromanagers to give up that little bit of control that they have to be able to create that accountability? That accountability doesn't actually come through micromanaging.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I am writing a delegation course on this right now, an online learning experience on how to delegate effectively because it's
Yeah.
such a missing skill. And we just wrote the micromanagement piece on it. I think the intent to micromanage is good. If you want to over-explain the why it's important and the what,
Yeah.
not the how. But over-explain how does this fit into the business? Why is this important? Why do we do it this way? I think working in a CRM is a perfect example. You don't need to sit down with somebody, hopefully, and say, click on this cell and start typing the last name is how we enter in last names. What you do need to explain is We chose this CRM because it's helping us deliver on our marketing and sales strategies in A, B, and C ways. In order to prepare reports to manage the business effectively, we have to enter data consistently from field to field and in certain ways because we know that clean data in creates clean reports out. So here are our standards, and here's where you find the standards. That's directing the work effectively versus micromanaging is, well, click in the last name field. Now type in the last name, make sure that the first letter of the last name is capitalized. That's micromanaging. If you want to over-explain the why and the what, and leave the how to your training manual.
Great advice. Thank you so much. All right. As we wrap things up, I have my signature question I would like to ask you, and then we'll dive into how people can find you. The name of this podcast is Reflect Forward. What does Reflect Forward mean to you?
Oh, just got goosebumps when you asked that question. That's a good one. The coaching technique I use for myself is when I'm in a tough situation, a big situation, I ask myself, what's the story that I want to tell about this when it's over? Specifically about how I showed up. Sometimes it's about what does success mean? What does winning look like? I think that's important. But for me to show up in integrity in this world, I want to be able to ask and answer myself, what's the story that I want to tell about how I engaged in this situation when it's over?
Oh my gosh, that has to be one of my favorite answers. That is so good. Yeah, it is. It's the essence of it, right? I am in this moment right now. What do I want it to look like? What do I want people to say about it? What do I want to be able to say about it when I get through it? That is, I think, the pure essence of reflecting forward. All right, Stefanie, where can people find you?
Yes, I would love if folks would join us over at thechangearchitects.com. We've got a podcast called the Hot Mess Hotline, where we explore some of these hot mess stories with leaders like yourself and other resources for folks to learn more about our perspective and change readiness and the simplicity of upskilling.
Perfect. And are you active on LinkedIn, or is there
Oh,
a
yeah,
way from through social media
LinkedIn,
that
yeah,
people can connect with
YouTube,
you?
yeah, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Yes, LinkedIn, of course. I love LinkedIn. All my good friends come from LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll include all of those in the show notes as well, so people can just click on it and find you.
Thank you.
Well, Stefanie, this has been such a pleasure to spend the last half an hour with you. I do agree we're kindred souls, so this was a very fun interview. Thank you for spending half an hour of your time with me today.
Oh, thank you, Kerry, so much for the work that you do to bring these conversations to life. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, hang tight, everyone. I'll be right back. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that interview. With that, I will leave you to your week. If you like this podcast, please write a review, subscribe to it on your favorite podcast platform, on YouTube, share it with a friend so you can share these amazing stories out there with the world and all kinds of great advice for leaders. I really appreciate it. It helps with the algorithms as well. So take care, and we will see you next week. Thanks.